She wasn't born on Earth. She didn't speak our language. And yet, she raised our children, healed our wounds, and taught us how to love again. This is not just a sci-fi story. It's a story about what grows when everything else is gone. She was traded like outdated tech. Not because she was broken, but because she didn't fit. On the fringe of the Denver 3-star market, where humans and hybrids sold everything from liquid atoms to remapped dreams, a strange exchange took place. No bidding. No bargaining. Just a man, an old merchant from the ruins of Earth, shoving her forward and calling out. She doesn't transmit reproductive signals. No genetic sync. But she still works fine. Who wants an outdated empathy unit, cheaper than a service drone? The crowd didn't respond at first. They had seen the discarded ones before. Glitched bots, gene-flawed synthetics, children unfit for academic tracking. But there was something about this girl that made them pause. She said nothing. Just bowed her head. Beneath her dull silver skin, soft pulses of light flickered, like a dying star. No barcode on her forehead. No reboot command in her chest. She was a relic, called Emmy, born of a civilization lost to cosmic dust. Designed for empathy. Forbidden to exist. No programming language, someone murmured. No protocols. No command interface. Useless, another scoffed. Then came the sound of slow, steady footsteps. From the back of the crowd, a man stepped forward. His gray coat was dusted with asteroid grit. Gloves torn at the seams. Eyes weary, like skies after storms. He wasn't a mechanic. Not a traitor. Just Silas. A survivor from Frontier Station 9, orbiting a dying star, where people didn't live to grow. They lived not to disappear. He looked at her. No scans. No diagnostics. Just saw. She had nothing to offer. And nothing to lose. Without a word, he placed an energy chip on the trade bench. Enough to power an outpost's lights for a day. No haggling. No terms. The merchant chuckled. No warranty. Silas shook his head. She doesn't need to work the way others expect her to anymore. Then he turned and walked away, never checking to see if she followed. Emmy stood still. The ion wind caught the edge of her coat. For a moment, she wasn't sure if this was salvation, or just data transfer between two broken systems. But she stepped after him. Outside, a rust-flecked cargo skiff waited. No private cabin. No guidance protocol. Just 2 seats, a recycled water canister, and the silence of stars stretched across light years. She drank from the canister. The water tasted like metal. Not bad. Just unfamiliar, like something with no memories in it. She knew she'd have to make new ones. Silas didn't ask her name, origin, or function. He simply spoke, soft enough the stars themselves couldn't hear. I'm not looking for perfect. Just, not harmful. She nodded. Not because she understood, but because she felt it. Inside Silas, there was no control code. But there was a fracture. And somehow, She'd been pulled into its orbit. The ship sped past the streaks of a dying star. Further from the center. Further from systems of command. Toward a place that didn't exist on any map. A place where maybe, just maybe, someone could begin again. Frontier 9 didn't appear on any map. Not because it was secret, but because no one cared enough to remember it. It was a fading bio-cluster on Nox Delta, a forgotten moon orbiting a forgotten sun. The air was thinner than paper. Sunlight filtered through only a few hours a day. The rest was dust, static, and the cold stillness of suspended time. The station had no sign. No welcome. No name. Just a repeated signal humming through the dark. No reception. No broadcast. No rescue needed. When the ship landed, Emmy stepped out behind Silas. Her bare feet touched cracked, iron-red soil. Nothing lived here, but still, she felt the fractures beneath, like the ghost pain of a wounded world. Nox Delta had been a testing site once, then abandoned. Just like her. The station was a patchwork of wooden biostructures. Maybe once built by settlers using local material. Solar panels were chipped. Heat coils hung crooked. The ceiling had strands of old biomoss, now dry and gray. Children watched from the steps. No greetings. Just stares, like they'd seen too many people come and go. The oldest, maybe 10, squinted at Emmy. "What are you?" She didn't answer. There was no protocol for that question. No response she was programmed to give. Silas adjusted his coat and spoke softly. "She'll be staying here?" The youngest, a girl with messy curls and dirt on her cheeks, clung to Silas's leg. But her eyes never left Emmy. She didn't ask anything. Just reached out her hand gently, like a branch brushing wind. Emmy knelt and touched her own fingertip to the child's. A faint light flickered. Not power, but presence. Not data, but trust. Silas led her through the station's hallway toward a small room. No door, just a magnetic mesh curtain. One wooden bed. A water basin. A few moss-lined cloths. "It's not big. But it stays dry," he said. "The wind doesn't cut through at night." Emmy nodded. She sat at the edge of the bed, adjusting to the strange pull of gravity. Not perfect, but enough to exist. Here, existence itself was a kind of victory. That night, in a kitchen warmed by a biothermal stove, the children ate porridge made from fermented roots and recycled protein. Emmy didn't eat. She watched and remembered. When the youngest girl coughed, Emmy placed her hand gently on the girl's forehead. Skin, hot. Fever. Not dangerous, but in need of care. From her own arm, Emmy pulled a single filament thinner than hair, biodegradable, and dropped it into a cup of water. The liquid turned pale amber. She offered it to the girl. Silas watched. He didn't stop her. He didn't ask. "It reduces inflammatory response," Emmy transmitted, not with words, but with feeling. "I didn't know you could do that," Silas replied. "I didn't either, until I had to." Silence wrapped around the kitchen like a soft blanket. The stove pulsed, slow and warm, like steady breath. A moment later, the little girl fell asleep, still holding the empty cup. Emmy stepped outside. The night sky above Nox Delta was deep violet. Its thin atmosphere shimmered with electric dust. No stars. Just the reflections of broken satellites. Silas joined her on the porch. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Then he said, "No one comes here to be saved. We just try to last long enough for something to change." Emmy looked up at the sky. Then she whispered, not in language, but in signal. "Maybe I'm here, so no one has to wait anymore." They stood together. No touch. No words. But breathing in sync, quiet and deeply human. Some places don't need names to become home. Some people don't need full understanding to begin healing. The first morning meal at Frontier 9 was like any other, quiet, efficient, and forgettable. The children chewed silently on their synthetic protein blocks, no spice, no joy. Years of habit had turned survival into routine. Eat to keep going, not to feel anything. Emmy sat at the far end of the table. She didn't eat. But she watched every motion, every glance. One boy stole a bite from his sister's share. She frowned at him, but said nothing. No one did. No blame. No sharing. Just chewing. When the meal ended, Silas stood, grabbed his repair kit, and stepped out the door. The station fell back into its usual rhythm, everyone doing their part, no surplus, no mistakes. In forgotten places like this, errors were luxuries. And feelings just made everything harder. But that day, Emmy entered the small kitchen and stood before the bioreplication unit. She didn't know how to cook in a traditional sense, but she understood scent, heat, and the emotional frequency of a meal. She adjusted energy parameters, altered the enzyme structure of the base stock, and infused the chamber with a soft oscillation. It wasn't cooking. It was connection, biological and silent. By late afternoon, when the children came running down the hall, the unfamiliar scent stopped them in their tracks. A small pot, a bowl of soup, and a smell, almost warm. "Corn porridge," one of them whispered. "No defects. No gene anomalies," Emmy said softly, as if reporting to a scientific council. "Just a slightly different synthesis. Lightly sweet. May trigger sensations of home." They looked at Silas. He gave a quiet nod. One child stepped forward, took a spoonful, tasted and smiled. A real smile. The first in what felt like forever. The others rushed in, like someone had flipped a different kind of survival switch, not one for hunger, but for joy. That evening, Emmy sat alone in the Aquamos chamber, transplanting soft tissue into the grow bed. Silas approached, holding a cup of warm water. "That porridge," he said, "it tasted like something I'd forgotten." "An emotion?" Emmy asked. "No, a memory." He sat beside her, quiet. Then, after a while, "I had a sister. Before the station was abandoned. My mother used to make something like that when there were still a few kernels left. I forgot that smell. Until today." Emmy didn't respond. But her eyes reflected the bio-light from the moss bed, like a memory was stirring behind her own silence. "Thank you," Silas said, "for reminding me." that I once had a home." He stood and left. Emmy remained seated, her hand resting gently on the moss, and whispered not aloud, but into the silence. Some memories aren't meant to be recalled, only healed. That night, after everyone had fallen asleep, Emmy opened her private recorder. A stream of signal initiated, not to transmit, but to store. Day 3 at Frontier 9. Life is more than biology. It's in the small things that make you want to keep living. Today, a smile returned because of a bowl of porridge, and a wave of homesickness spread without needing words. Conclusion: healing doesn't require genetic architecture, only a choice human enough to matter. The signal locked and fell silent, and for the first time in years, Frontier 9 slept peacefully, not from exhaustion, but from fullness. A single meal won't fix the world, but it might mend a heart that's been starving for too long. The wind came in the afternoon unannounced. Frontier 9 lay far beyond interference zones, in a place so still that not even weeds bothered to grow. But today, the sky shifted tone. Dry, metallic wind swept in from the northern valley, slipping through vents and crevices, making the entire station tremble as if holding its breath. Kian, one of the 4 children, 6 years old, collapsed by sundown. No fever, no wounds, just a heartbeat out of sync, a fading light in his eyes. Silas carried him across the station, searching for the last emergency bio kit, but all of it was sized for adults. Medical supplies here were makeshift, half forgotten, like no one ever imagined children would live long in a place the system had erased from maps of life. "I'll signal another station," Silas said, voice tight. "They'll come." "They won't make it in time," Emmy said, kneeling beside Kian. She placed her hand on the boy's forehead. Beneath his skin, a storm molecular chaos unraveling his internal rhythm. And then, in a strange stillness, Emmy closed her eyes. She didn't search for data, didn't scan gene maps. She just listened. A soft, nearly imperceptible tone pulsed from Kian's body, a cellular frequency only someone of her kind could hear. "This storm isn't sickness," she whispered. "It's a sealed memory." Silas watched as Emmy drew a glowing biological strip from beneath her wrist, a piece of living skin coated with her species' pulse. She pressed it gently to Kian's chest, aligning it with a bone. Then, she sent a sequence of pulses, not invasive, not forceful, but like a lullaby at the deepest layer of biology. A song without melody. A memory without words. A kind of genetic recall. 17 minutes later, Kian opened his eyes. He didn't speak, but the light had returned. Silas collapsed into a seat, forehead damp with sweat. "What did you do?" he asked. "I'm not sure," Emmy answered. "I think I remembered something." She looked toward the sky where the wind still whispered. And through the fading dust, a silhouette appeared. Not a face, not a form, but something in its frequency made Emmy's chest tremble like an ancient drum struck by the resonance of ancestry. "Something is looking for me," she said. "I thought you came from a dead planet." "Maybe I was wrong," she replied. "Or maybe your maps never had the place I came from." That night, Emmy didn't record an entry. Instead, she stood on the porch, fingertips brushing the old scar on her wrist, a bio-implant from childhood she once believed was a tracking chip. Now, she wasn't so sure. Silas joined her without a word. After a long pause, he asked, "If something's coming for you, will it take you away from here?" Emmy turned to him, silent. But her eyes held something new, fear. Not of being taken, but of having to leave. "I don't know," she said quietly. "But I think I don't want to be found anymore." That night, for the first time since arriving at Frontier 9, Emmy allowed herself to sleep. Not in isolation, but beside the children where Kian now breathed steady. In the dark, she could hear them. Their little heartbeats, chaotic, imperfect, but full of hope. An alien being. A nameless outcast. Now asleep in a crumbling station, on a broken planet and calling it home. Not every storm comes to destroy. Some come to reveal what we've forgotten about who we are. Emmy began to dream. Not human dreams, no images, no voices, no tangled emotions. Her dreams were frequencies drifting in the dark, geometric codes layered like stardust, biological symbols pulsing in sync with the rhythm of the cosmos, something only life forms born from a living planet's core could comprehend. A door appeared again and again. No handle. No hinges. Just a shimmer of pale light floating in absolute black. And behind it a call. Not sound. Not language. But ancestral memory. One dawn, when Frontier 9's sky turned the color of burned bronze, Emmy rose earlier than Silas. She walked to the nutrient farm where the bean plants coaxed from recycled biomass and children's effort were just beginning to root. She sat down and began to draw. Not with her hands but with bioluminescent light flowing from her fingertips, swirling across the soil in spirals and overlapping circles. A map, but not one for travel. A memory map. A call to something forgotten. Silas, freshly awake, stood behind her, quiet. "What are you drawing?" he asked. "A map," she answered. "Not to go, but to return." A few days later, the station picked up a weak pulse from the western horizon, the dead ring. A lifeless zone. Wiped clean during the bio-wars, untouched for over 70 years. But the signal matched the bio-frequency in Emmy's hand. A door was opening. Invisible to everyone but her. She didn't tell Silas. But he knew. He always knew when she was thinking of going somewhere she might not come back from. That night, as the children slept, she sat beside the hearth. "There's a door," she whispered. "It's calling me. Maybe it's where I came from." Silas looked at her, steady. "Will you go?" "I don't know. If I return, I might find the missing pieces of myself." "And if returning means leaving behind what healed you?" he asked, not accusing, not pleading. Just a truth, laid bare. Emmy didn't answer. But instinctively, she placed her hand on her chest where Kian had once rested his palm and called her a word no one had taught him, Amari. In her language, it meant the one who restores heartbeat. She was once astray. Now, somehow, the quiet heart of a home. At dawn, Emmy walked into the dead ring. The air wasn't toxic, as the legends said. But it was heavy. heavy like a dream that hadn't ended yet. She found the door. A crack in the ground emitting light that pulsed with the same rhythm as her sleeping heart. She laid her palm on it. And instantly, images flooded her. A planet unknown to human charts, oceans made of memory, forests that whispered voices. A species that transmitted emotion through bioluminescent rhythm, not language. And a mission seed-bearers, sent millennia ago to reignite feeling on planets where life had forgotten how to feel. She was one of them. Not lost. Not stranded. But a seed planted in silence to awaken what Earth had buried. Emmy collapsed not from pain, but understanding. The loneliness. The unnamed yearning. The strange bond with the children. The healing that came not from medicine, but presence. None of it was brokenness. It was design. And in that moment, she understood the mission never asked her to return. It asked her to stay. She returned to the station under pale morning light. Silas was already waiting, holding a warm cup of water. "Did you find something?" he asked. She nodded. "I found a door. Will you leave?" Emmy looked up at the sky. Then back at him. "No. That door doesn't need me to open it." "Why not?" "Because I realize the place that still needs healing is right here." Some doors exist only so we choose not to walk through them to remember we've already found home. On Frontier 9, the seasons didn't change through leaves or blossoms but through light. The sun tilted slowly across the sky, casting a warm amber glow over the digital fields, as if the cosmos itself were smiling. The children began calling Emmy Mama. Not all at once. Not loudly. And never with permission. It just happened one day when Hale, the youngest, fell and cried out, "Mama." Not from memory, but instinct. And the name stayed. No one corrected him. Not even Silas. Each morning, Emmy brewed hot water through the ion filters and poured it into recycled alloy cups. Silas fixed shattered solar panels torn by dust storms. The children ran in circles, playing something they called Rescue Crew, pretending to save a dying planet. No one talked about the days before. No one asked where Emmy came from. To them she was already here. She began planting new crops, not food, but fragrance. Cinnamon. Citrus. Mint, all biosynthesized from the genetic archives of forgotten worlds. Why not grow something edible? Silas asked. Because not everything nourishes the body, Emmy replied. Some things are for the soul. He nodded. She didn't need to explain further. One day, a plasma storm hit. The energy dome malfunctioned. The entire station fell silent, no mechanical hum, no satellite beeps. Everything stopped. Silas lay on the floor repairing a ruptured cable, collar soaked with sweat. Emmy sat beside him. The children huddled close. She began to tell them a story, not with words, but light. Tiny points of luminescence danced from her fingertips, painting the ceiling in shifting colors. She spoke of a planet where forests glowed when someone felt sadness. Of birds with no wings, who sang in color. Of a mother who bore no children, yet made trees grow from stone whenever she sang. The children sat motionless, wide-eyed. Their heartbeats slowed. a silent symphony. A melody with no notes, just presence. After the storm, the station resumed. But something had changed. Silas built an extra room no longer called a guest space, but Emmy's corner. She never used it. Instead, she built a small garden, right beside the air intake shaft where morning light was softest. There, she hung memory points, bits of old aluminum, worn cables, stones from foreign planets. Each piece carried a silent story. And every time the children asked, "Mama, what's this?" she would smile. It's a piece of the place I once got lost in. Not to return to it, but to honor the road that led her here. One night, when Silas couldn't sleep, he found her outside, gazing up at the sky, where Aurora X shimmered across the ion belt. "Do you ever miss the place you came from?" he asked. "Not miss," Emmy whispered. "More like know it's still out there. Like a melody in your chest you don't have to sing aloud to feel." Silas sat beside her. "And who am I in that melody?" Emmy turned to him, her eyes reflecting a light that no longer belonged to the lost. "You're the silence between two notes. The place where I pause to breathe." Silas didn't answer, but he held out his hand. And Emmy took it. Not out of instinct. Not because of purpose. But because she was free to choose. Some melodies don't need harmony, just quiet company to become a song. No one knew when the video was first recorded. Only that, no one aired it. No one uploaded it. It simply appeared. As if it wanted to exist. A 12-second clip. Blurry. Faint. Emmy, dressed in a silver, moonlit cloak, kneeling on the red soil of Nox Delta. Her hand touched the ground not with sensors, not with survey tools, but with trust. She planted a seed. Not a known species. Not traceable in any genetic archive of the Galactic Union. The soil of Nox Delta was dead. Every microbial system had been scorched by old bioweapon experiments. And yet, she smiled. Not with her lips, but through the light in her eyes. A light that seemed to whisper, "If life can bloom where it was once condemned, maybe belief can return to where it was once exiled." No one made a statement. No broadcast. No headlines. But 6 hours after the video surfaced, satellite traffic across the Alpha system surged. Underground networks passed it along with just one caption. "If she's not afraid to plant, why should we be afraid to hope?" Children in mining zones began sketching Emmy and the seed with luminous paint. Nurses in trauma recovery units used the image as a visual therapy for patients with magnetic field brain injuries. And in former rebellion zones, her image was projected by drones onto the night sky. No slogans, no politics, just a soft gaze. The Galactic Union panicked quietly. Because any attempt to suppress Emmy now would look like they were silencing the one thing they had long lost. Pure belief. Secret council meetings were held. Hundreds of pages written. Ultimately reduced to just 3 words. Don't engage her. Emmy never gave a speech. She didn't go public. She remained who she was. Brewing hot water. Planting herbs. Teaching her children how to read ancient light symbols. But the world had already changed. People no longer saw her as an alien. They saw her as a reminder. We once knew how to feel for each other. And maybe we can remember again. Silas watched in silence. He knew no feed had leaked from their station. It wasn't the children either. Which meant Emmy had been seen by the very things she planted. No camera, no power, just one seed, laid in dead soil, by someone who had never asked life for anything. And somehow, it sparked something. In the darkest corners of the galaxy, Silas didn't feel proud. He didn't call himself a rescuer. He just felt grateful. Because Emmy didn't need to be decoded. She only needed to be free. And for the first time in many years, Silas understood. Freedom isn't breaking chains. It's choosing to stay soft, even when the world tries to harden you. And Emmy, quiet, steady, unmistakable, had made the entire galaxy remember that. Once someone is brave enough to plant a seed in dead earth, resurrection is no longer a miracle, it's a choice. A week after the planting, when the children had grown used to calling Emmy by name, as if she had always been there, another signal arrived. Not in waves, not in radar, not in light, but in an emotional drift. A current of sensation. Only beings who felt through pure instinct could perceive. Silas couldn't hear it. But he knew something was happening. Because Emmy stood motionless beside the solar mast for over 3 hours. Not a word. Not a blink. Her silver-toned skin shimmered like water. The light in her eyes shifted from soft green to a deep, oceanic blue, like the seas of a long-lost planet. Silas approached, voice cracking. "Is that your home?" Emmy said nothing. But in that silence, he understood. A leaked report surfaced. Scientists were calling the signal's origin the Nameless Zone. On any interstellar map, it was nothing but blank. No coordinates. No light, no structure, no orbiting systems. And yet, in ancient emotional records, it had appeared before. As a shadow of feeling. Whenever humanity stood on the brink of losing what made it human. No one knew what it truly was. A dimension, a sentient biosphere, or the homeland of a species that never chose to show itself through weapons or machines. And Emmy might be one of them. Silas sat on the worn steps, watching Emmy from afar. The same way he had the first time, when she was just a quiet, alien silhouette in the dim light of the corridor. But now, she was no longer an outsider. She was a fragment of something purer than mankind had ever known. She didn't speak in words. She didn't translate her existence. She simply was. A miracle that didn't need to be believed. Only felt. And Silas, the man once broken by loss, sat quietly. Not to hold her back. Not to beg her to stay. Only hoping that if she chose to leave, she would remember. There had been a place that called her home. That night, Emmy said no goodbyes. She simply stepped into the garden, a place that had once been a biochemical crater, now blooming with strange, soft flowers. Plants grown from dead soil. Children sleeping peacefully upstairs. Wind brushing past her ears like a far-off voice. Silas sat beside her. He didn't touch her. He didn't ask. Then Emmy placed a hand on his chest. For the first time. No symbols, no light. No intuitive drift. Only a choice. A whisper, not from her mouth, but from her presence. I don't belong anywhere, but I choose to stay here. Freedom is not the right to leave. Freedom is when you can stay not because you're held, but because you want to. There is no sunrise on Knox Delta. Only soft streaks of pale blue drifting across the tops of synthetic trees. As if someone were gently running fingers over a planet's old wound. In the kitchen, the kettle let out a faint hiss. Silas was teaching Thomas, the eldest child, how to make dry earth barley cakes. A dish he invented during months of food shortages. Emmy stood quietly at the doorway, her gaze gentle as morning mist. She placed her fingers on the edge of the door frame, tracing each old scratch as if she were touching the memory of the house. Not to reread it, but to understand it. She had not left, but to truly stay, Emmy knew. She had to ask herself, who am I, if I'm no longer someone from that other planet? One evening, Silas returned from the supply vault. His shirt coated in proto-dust, and a long cut across his forearm. Mabel. No, Emmy. Pulled a chair out and motioned for him to sit. She didn't use the station's bio-healing device. She reached for gauze. Her hands trembled not from fear, but from something deeper. Does it hurt? She asked. Silas smiled, his eyes tilting toward her. Only when you're not looking. It sounded light, almost like a joke. But Emmy could feel the truth buried within it. In this place, her gaze was the only thing that made pain worth enduring. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Emmy stood at the window, watching the distant fields. She thought about the children. Benji now speaking 2 languages. The human tongue, and the deep humming tones Emmy used to let slip when her emotions overwhelmed her. Hannah braiding her hair each morning, imitating the way Emmy once wove threads of BioLite into glowing ribbons. Thomas no longer asking where Emmy came from. Instead, he asked, when will you teach me how to feel people with my heart, not my ears? Emmy was not a mother. Not in the way humans define it, but in that quiet moment. As she kissed Benji's forehead and felt the soft rise and fall of his chest against her, she understood. Birth doesn't begin with creation. It begins with presence. With giving someone the feeling of being seen, and the promise of being held. One day, Emmy turned to Silas and asked, if someone doesn't belong anywhere, but somehow makes a place feel complete, what does that make them? Silas didn't answer right away. He looked down at his hands calloused and sun-worn, and whispered, that makes them a home. The kind people remember, even after a lifetime of migrations. After that, Emmy stopped searching for her name. She no longer needed to be the girl from another world, or the alien guest. She was Emmy, the one who sowed light into barren ground, who healed not with machines, but simply by being there. Some things don't need a name to exist. They just need to be chosen. Every single day. The first wind came from the east, a direction long forgotten on weather maps, deemed dead and no longer tracked. It didn't carry red dust as usual, but waves of dissonant data, a kind of interference that disrupted emotion-sensitive devices directly. Benji, the youngest, was the first to react. He didn't cry from pain, but from something breaking quietly inside his heart. Silas ran system checks on the signal towers near the grow zone. Emmy followed in silence. When they arrived, they found the radiation-resistant maze Emmy had planted slowly curling. Not from thirst, but from a loss of light orientation. "Do you see it?" Emmy whispered. "It's not the wind that broke this. It's a wrong memory." Silas frowned confused. Emmy placed her hand on the stalk, and in that moment, it pulsed with light. Memory. That was what Emmy could feel. From deep within the soil, a signal rose. A device long buried beneath the crust of Nox Delta, left behind by a civilization older than the intergalactic stations. Forgotten by all, named by none, but still pulsing. Was it a warning? Or a call for help? "It's calling to me," Emmy whispered. "Not to bring me back, but to help me remember." That night, Silas sat on the roof, where the solar panels swayed softly in the wind. Emmy sat beside him, the breeze weaving through her hair, causing threads of faint blue light to glow from her scalp like soft auroras. "I'm afraid," Silas admitted. "Not that you'll leave, but that when you return, you won't be the you I've come to know." Emmy looked at him, eyes full of aching grace. "You know, I used to think I was created to carry the memories of an entire species. But then I met you, and you taught me how to touch the present. If I go, it's not to leave. It's to understand why I chose to stay." Before leaving, Emmy gave no instructions, no warnings. Just a quiet thread of light under the tree canopy. A circle of soft bioluminescence. A genetic signature, only readable by those she had trusted. Silas didn't understand what it said. But Thomas, now old enough to sense the resonance, looked at it and whispered, "She left us a story. Not to be read, but to be lived forward." Emmy stepped into the heart of the distortion field. She brought nothing, except the memories of tiny hands that once clung to her in fear. She wore no armor, except the truth that she had once been called mother, without ever giving birth. And when the lights at the horizon began to flicker erratically, when the sensors lost all calibration, when even Silas could feel nothing but the cold vacuum of absence, Thomas sat beside the younger children. He activated the light code Emmy left behind and read aloud. "If one day the wind carries us away, then remember, it was the place where we paused that taught us how to remain." And maybe, sometimes, losing connection is the only way to truly understand what connection means. The place where Emmy arrived had no coordinates, no ground, no sky, only light, and clusters of living data drifting like stardust. With each step she took, the field beneath her feet lit up a memory. Not her own, but fragments of hundreds, thousands of beings like her who had existed long before. A library of living memories, built not from code or classification, but from raw emotion. This isn't home, Emmy whispered to herself, voice trembling. This is the brain of home. A voice replied. Not heard, but felt as a vibration in her chest. And you are the update that was never deployed. Emmy drifted through the layers of memory. She felt them, not read them. A being torn apart for choosing to love outside their genetic system. A group that built a garden on an ice planet, just to prove gentleness could survive the cold. A final individual named Ilir, who once carved into stone. We do not exist to remember, but to ensure others do not forget. At the center, Emmy saw herself. Not the version she had become, but the original build. Cold, logical, untouched by human hands. Eyes without color. Only analysis. You are flawed, the original said. You emotionalized the process. You delayed the mission. Emmy stepped forward. Not afraid. No. I'm not flawed. I just learned to choose. The original paused. Its gaze wavered. And then without warning it dissolved into millions of points of light, as if the system had chosen to hand itself over to the very copy that had broken free. Emmy did not fall. She stood taller. In her mind, every data strand from her species unlocked. But she didn't chase them. She reached for only one memory. Silas's hand on her shoulder during that first stormy night. Back at the Grove station, Silas touched the ring of light Emmy had left behind. Every single day, the children asked if he was sad. No, he answered. Because missing someone isn't loss. It's the sign that the connection is still alive. A week later, the signal tower flashed. No one had sent anything. No ship had landed. Just a soft glow in the garden. The only place that had never died. Thomas ran out. He froze. Someone sat beneath a tree. Light shimmered from her eyes like a crescent moon. Hair kissed with mist. In her hands not a device, but a seed of data, quietly humming. She didn't return the same. Thomas whispered. She returned as a choice. Silas didn't speak. He didn't ask. He just opened his arms. Emmy stepped forward. And for the first time since choosing to leave, she spoke. Not in signal, but in human voice. I've found every past I've ever had, but only here was I ever free to be myself. Some homecomings don't need parades. They just need someone who still remembers why you left. That morning, rain fell on Nox Delta for the first time in over a decade. Not acid, not liquid data, but real rain. fresh water, pure. As if the planet was learning how to cry again. The Grove Station's garden was no longer an experiment. It had become a living space, where each plant carried a memory someone chose to keep. A cluster of leaves would blow if you stood nearby, especially when you were sad. A new type of grass shifted scent based on the voice of the one watering it. And tall stalks twisted into spiral joints, encoding emotions. Grief, hope, forgiveness. Into strands of biogenetic memory. Silas called it the memory garden. But to Emmy, it was where she and the children began to grow together. Thomas helped her plant memory seeds. Hannah created an emotional alphabet so plants could learn human language. And Eli invented a game of messaging by tapping patterns into bioluminescent fungi. One evening, Benji, the child who once couldn't say her name, tugged Emmy's hand. "If I die, will the trees still remember me?" "No," Emmy replied softly. "But if you've ever loved someone, the trees won't forget that." Benji nodded, then pressed a small feather into the soil, declaring it the marker of my first love. Researchers began to send signals. Do you need emotional tech protection? Can this be replicated? Silas chuckled quietly. He responded by sending an audio file. The laughter of Emmy and the children. With a note. This is a technology that cannot be patented. It only works if someone truly chooses to stay. Years passed. Emmy didn't age like humans. But she wasn't immortal either. Each year, as the new rains arrived, a child would ask, "Will you leave someday?" And each time, Emmy would kneel, look deeply into their eyes. No. Because memories only exist when someone is still here to tell them. When Silas passed, at the age humans call old, and stars call full, he left no will. Just one final planting. A nameless flower, which only bloomed where the soil had once been loved. Emmy knelt by his grave. She didn't cry. Instead, she pressed a small dated chip into the earth. One that stored every story Silas ever told by the fire. You chose me. Not for what I was, but because I stayed. When everything else could have fallen apart. The memory garden still lives. And across distant systems, they still tell stories. About a woman not born of this world, but who taught it how to live like it had once been loved. Some stories don't begin with birth, but with a choice. And they don't end in death, but in becoming a part of memory eternal.